The first night at the new apartment should have been a fresh start for Natalia, but instead it was pierced by a chilling, persistent cry that robbed her of peace. The sound of a child's tears echoed from the flat above, filling the darkness with a haunting melody of despair. Natalia lay awake, her heart pounding, wondering how to soothe a child who seemed so far yet so near, so real, yet shrouded in mystery. Only 1 week had passed since Natalia moved here. The nights were restless, haunted by dreams as cold as stone. The sharp words of the indifferent gynecologist echoed in her mind, declaring the slim chances of motherhood. Adding to her sorrow was the ceaseless infant's wailing above, a strange sound that sliced through the quiet like a knife. With Yegor away on an unexpected business trip, she was left utterly alone to face these fears. Night after night, the sadness above grew louder, weaving itself into her nightmares. She tried to tell herself it was just a typical adjustment to a new place, some quirk of unfamiliar walls and strange echoes. But with every sob and whimper, doubt gnawed at her. What if the child was sick? What if the parents were too exhausted, or worse, incapable of caring for him properly? Her concern tightened into a knot as she dressed hastily, determined to investigate. As Natalia stepped into the corridor, the cries instantly ceased, leaving an eerie silence that pressed against her ears. She stood frozen, feeling the cold rush of emptiness where the sound had been just moments ago. Returning to her apartment, the silence offered no solace. Her mind raced, and sleep refused to come. Morning brought no relief from the questions threading through her thoughts like a stubborn vine. Seeking answers, Natalia encountered Agafia, the elderly neighbor who lived 1 floor below. On the stairs, she gathered courage to ask about the child she had heard. Agafia's eyes flickered with surprise and a strange unease, and she revealed that apartment 84 had been empty for a long time. The denial didn't sit well, but the old woman's dismissal left Natalia puzzled and longing for clarity. Natalia's pale complexion deepened from exhaustion, shadows cradling her eyes, as the relentless nights continued their assault. Desperation grew like ivy around her fragile resolve. One afternoon, as she racked her brain for explanations, a firm knock startled her. At her door stood Elizaveta Yakovlevna, the neighbor below, whose presence carried a solemn weight, like a bearer of forgotten truth. Inviting her inside, Natalia braced to confess her torment, fingers trembling with nerves. The woman's voice softened, her tale unfurling like a whispered confession. A year ago, a young couple with a sprightly boy named Makar had lived in that very apartment. Their love fractured by frequent quarrels, the thin walls bore witness to their tumultuous lives. One dreadful day, during a bitter argument, the little boy had wandered onto the stairwell, where tragedy struck. Makar, in his restless innocence, tumbled down the stairs, striking his head with cruel finality. The neighborhood was engulfed in sorrow. His passing, sudden and tragic, shattered the fragile calm that had once filled the hallways. The couple moved out soon after, silence replacing laughter. Yet sometimes, Elizaveta said, the sound of his cries would seep through the walls, long and sorrowful, as if time refused to heal this wound. Hearing this, Natalia felt a chill spread through her veins. The child's cries were not a product of imagination or earthly sorrow, but echoes of a spectral grief. That very night, clutching hope and fear, she stepped onto the landing once again. To her awe and terror, Makar appeared, his small figure seated on the steps, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. His quivering lip and pale cheeks told tales unsaid. Frozen between disbelief and compassion, Natalia whispered to the boy, careful not to startle him. Her words stumbled over one another as she asked why he wept. Makar's response was simple and heart-wrenching. He could not find his beloved bunny, the cherished companion who helped him find sleep in the darkness. Natalia offered to help search for the lost toy, but the boy's somber eyes told a different story. His mother had taken it away. Faint noises from the street below broke the fragile moment. Natalia glanced down, and upon looking back, Makar was gone, vanished like mist. Determined to unlock this mystery, she sought the apartment's past residents. The elusive trail led you to a neglected house on the outskirts of the city, where faded curtains and laundry fluttering on a clothesline betrayed signs of life and sorrow. There she found Varvara, a young woman whose face was a map of pain and endurance. Her hollow gaze seemed to shield an ocean of grief as she brusquely questioned Natalia's intentions. Shadows of the past clung to her words as she coldly dismissed the visitor, mistaking her for officials or journalists who had disturbed her peace before. But Natalia's gentle persistence broke through, revealing her connection to Makar's spirit. The confrontation opened floodgates of anguish. Varvara's grief was raw, her voice trembling as she revealed that she blamed herself fully for the loss of her son. Natalia, moved beyond words, stood silently with the woman in a fragile embrace of shared sorrow. A small blue bunny, a poignant symbol amidst the broken past, was left for Natalia with a message from a grieving mother, a mother's undying love extended beyond the veil of death. That night, no cries haunted the silence. Natalia ventured once more into the darkness, finding Makar sitting softly on the windowsill, playing with his bunny. Their conversation was tender, a bridge between worlds. The boy's final word of advice was a blessing, bestowing the bunny to an unborn child he sensed in Natalia, infusing hope amid despair with the promise of dreams yet to come. In the stillness that followed, tears streaming freely down her face, Natalia held the soft toy close, feeling a strange comfort swell inside. The fabric of old pain and new life intertwined, weaving a fragile tapestry of healing. Night turned into a quiet dawn, bringing with it a subtle whisper of hope and the faintest stirrings of joy that hinted at a future rewritten by love. As the days unfolded, shadows began to lift, but questions lingered like the echo of a forgotten lullaby. The journey to understanding the mysteries of the past had just begun. With a heart newly awakened, Natalia prepared to face whatever truth lay hidden behind closed doors, ready to embrace the tender miracles waiting just beyond the horizon. The night seemed endless as Natalia tossed and turned, her rest shattered by the piercing sound of a child's cry echoing from the apartment above. The ghostly sobs clawed at her nerves, unwavering and desperate, as if pleading for help that never came. She had barely settled into her new home, and already the strange noises wrapped her nights in shadow and unease. The faint but persistent wailing unsettled her deeply, especially since Yegor, her husband, had left for a business trip, leaving her alone to grapple with mounting anxiety and sleeplessness. Haunted by nightmares and a bleak prognosis from her gynecologist that questioned her chances of motherhood, Natalia found herself caught between real pain and eerie sounds. The neighborhood whispered that newcomers often wrestled with restlessness, yet this suffering felt relentless, pulling her into darker thoughts. One particular night, as the child's cries stretched for over an hour, her patience snapped. Could the child be sick, abandoned, or worse yet, suffering abuse behind those apartment walls? Driven by a protective urgency, she closed herself hastily and crossed the hall. The moment she reached the door, the crying ceased, swallowed by an unnatural silence that chilled her more than the screams ever could. The quiet persisted long after she returned to her own bed, yet sleep remained elusive. At dawn, determined to unravel this mystery, she encountered Agafia, the neighbor from the floor beneath. The woman's calm bewilderment only fueled Natalia's confusion. That apartment has been empty for ages, Agafia claimed, her tone dismissive as she pointed away from the inquiry. Could it be hallucination? A trick of exhaustion? No, Natalia knew every note of that sobbing. It was real and painfully familiar. Her complexion paled, her spirit dimmed by countless nights of torment. Weeks of restless nights twisted her psyche thin, until one afternoon her ruminations were interrupted by a sharp knock. There stood Elizaveta Yakovlevna, the compassionate woman who lived below, wearing the burden of unspoken sorrow in her eyes. Warm yet fragile, Elizaveta introduced herself and gently invited them into Natalia's home. The barrier between strangers lowered as grief found its voice through Elizaveta's trembling narrative. She revealed the tragic tale of the vanished tenants of apartment 84. A young couple torn by conflict, their 5-year-old son Makar caught in the violent crossfire of their strife. On a fateful day, the child slipped unnoticed onto the stairwell, his tiny body tumbling down flight after flight. The dire accident claimed his life instantly, leaving the community shaken and his parents shattered. In the aftermath, the couple fled, leaving behind echoes of heartbreak and unslain wails. Elizaveta's words weighed heavily in the air. She confided that the child's cry was once a mournful passage accompanying their fights, long and heartbreaking. When Natalia mentioned the recent nocturnal sobbing, Elizaveta pondered that perhaps this spectral lament sought peace, a chance for a lost child's spirit to find refuge. That night, Natalia's heart throbbed with a strange mixture of fear and resolve. The cry had softened but shifted, now emerging from the dim corridor. On the landing she found Makar, ethereal yet vividly present, his azure eyes wet with sorrow, his small cheeks damp and tenderly swollen. Frozen, she battled the instinct to flee. Instead, she whispered gently, offering comfort to the littlest ghost struggling against eternal sorrow. "Are you cold, little one?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. His silence stretched, then the fragile words stumbled out. "I cannot sleep without my bunny. It's lost." She moved closer, heart trembling like a fragile leaf. "Shall we look together?" He bowed his head solemnly. "We will not find it. Mama took it." The hushed noise of a raucous group echoed below, pulling Natalia's gaze down the stairwell. When she looked back, Makar had vanished, leaving only the echo of his innocent plea. In search of more answers, she tracked the past renters with the help of Feodosi, a local realtor who unraveled layers of forgotten history tethered to this apartment. The trail led her to a secluded suburban home, weathered and forlorn, yet oddly alive with signs of habitation. Clothes hanging like spectral flags in the cold air. At last, the door creaked open to reveal Varvara, Makar's mother, gaunt and distant, her eyes hollowed by grief and time. She barely acknowledged Natalia's presence, her voice brittle and weary, as she questioned the visitor's purpose. The weight of a year's silent suffering hung between them, a chasm impossible to bridge with mere words. When Natalia mustered the courage to speak of Makar and his lost toy, Varvara's fragile veneer shattered into raw pain and fury. Accusing questions pierced the space, desperation overtaking her composure. "Who are you? What do you want? Leave me in peace." Yet Natalia stood firm, gently pleading for a gift to soothe the boy's restless spirit. Varvara's resistance faded into haunting quiet as she left a small, battered plush bunny on Natalia's windowsill, a fragile token of love, a promise kept. The sudden parting left Natalia shaken but hopeful, holding the tender emblem of a mother's enduring affection amid a void of loss. When night returned, she ventured to the landing once more, where Makar appeared quietly, cradling the very rabbit she now possessed. Their exchange was bittersweet, a tender affirmation of love, shared sorrow, and the invisible bonds that cross from this world to the next. "Mama loves you, and always will," Natalia whispered, as a soft goodbye made the boy fade into the night. The experience drained her, unraveling the threads of her heart and questioning the fragile boundaries between life and loss. Yet fate had a quiet twist awaiting her. A week later, news blossomed within her that a new life was stirring, a promise of hope sprouting from the fractured soil of despair. Natalia clung to the belief that her child's path would differ from the shadows of past grief, a whisper of joy amid lingering mysteries. Her restless nights had birthed a tender connection, a bridge spanning pain, haunting cries, and the yearning for peace. And as dawn painted the sky with soft light, an unspoken truth settled in her soul. Some stories leave marks, but also gifts, and the journey to uncover them is only just beginning. The night had cast its shadows deeply around Natalia's new apartment, thickening the silence only to be shattered by a piercing, heart-rending child's cry that echoed from the floor above. This was no mere noise. It unsettled her soul, threading through her restless nights with relentless persistence. Already battling the weight of sleeplessness and the cold certainty of her doctor's words about her uncertain fertility, Natalia found the nocturnal wailing unbearable. The absence of Yegor, her husband, on yet another business trip, only magnified her isolation, and that night, driven by desperation and maternal instinct, she resolved to confront the source of that mournful sound. As she rose, wrapped loosely in her worn robe, Natalia followed the faint, heart-wrenching sobs to the door of the apartment above. But just as she reached out and knocked, the cries inexplicably ceased, leaving an eerie silence that pressed heavily upon her chest. Retreating back to her dimly lit room, she tossed and turned until dawn, the image of the weeping child etched painfully in her mind. Morning light did little to dispel the mystery. On the staircase she encountered Agafia, the elderly neighbor from downstairs, whose tired eyes glimmered with a strange mix of sorrow and secrecy when Natalia inquired about the disturbance. To her disbelief, Agafia claimed the apartment above had been vacant for ages, denying any children lived there. Confused and unsettled, Natalia wondered if exhaustion had twisted her senses. Yet the cries persisted in her dreams and waking hours, her health fading rapidly under the weight of fatigue and anxiety. One afternoon, as she sat reflecting on the cruel enigma of the haunting sobs, an unexpected knock startled her. There stood Elizaveta Yakovlevna, the mysterious neighbor from below, a woman whose once composed demeanor now revealed thinly veiled sorrow and urgency. Introducing herself formally, Elizaveta conveyed an air of someone compelled by necessity rather than choice, drawn to Natalia by a burden she could no longer carry alone. With a voice heavy with grief, Elizaveta began to unravel the tragic story linked to apartment 84. Over a year prior, a young couple named Varvara and her husband had resided there with their 5-year-old son Makar, a boy whose laughter once brightened their thin-walled building, but whose presence would soon be overshadowed by unspoken sorrow. The marital discord between Varvara and her husband was no secret. Arguments echoed through the hallways, fraying the nerves of neighbors. On one fateful night, amidst a particularly heated quarrel, the front door had been unknowingly left ajar. Makar had slipped out, chasing a fleeting innocence down the stairs, until misfortune struck. A cruel tumble down 2 flights of steps left him gravely injured. The neighborhood was shattered by the tragedy. The boy's life was extinguished almost immediately, leaving a silence more profound than any cry. Varvara, a mother undone by loss and guilt, and her husband vanished from the building shortly thereafter. Elizaveta paused, her eyes clouded with tears as she recalled the long nights when the cries had pierced the walls. An echo of Makar's anguish, or perhaps the raw mourning of a community in shock. Then, turning to Natalia with a whispered plea, she suggested that perhaps the boy's restless spirit lingered still, searching for solace. If Natalia could hear him, if she might comfort that lost soul, perhaps the haunting could cease and peace be restored. The weight of the tale pressed upon Natalia's heart, shaking her to the core. That very night, steeling herself against the chill that crept under her skin, Natalia stepped onto the dimly lit landing where yesterday she had imagined herself speaking with the ghostly child. There, under the flickering light, sat a small boy, no older than 5, clutching a worn blue plush rabbit with checkered ears. Makar's eyes, glistening with unshed tears, met hers with an innocence and sadness that transcended the boundaries of the living and the dead. Fear warred in her chest. Words hovered hesitantly on her lips. "Are you cold, little one?" she ventured softly. No answer came at first, but when she asked why he cried, the boy's gaze lingered on her before he whispered, "I cannot sleep without my Barney. He is lost." The melancholy in his voice was palpable. Moved by a courage she barely summoned, Natalia suggested they search together for the missing toy. Yet Makar's small shoulders sagged as he confessed, "We will not find him. Mother took him." From below, the boisterous clamor of an inebriated group spilled into the still night, breaking the fragile moment. Natalia glanced down, and when she turned back, the child had vanished, like a mist dissipating in the morning sun. Driven by an urgent need for answers, Natalia traced the history of apartment 84, consulting Feodosy, the local real estate agent, whose connections extended into the darker corners of the housing market. Her inquiries led her to a dilapidated house on the outskirts of town, where the past clung hungrily to walls scarred by time. She knocked hesitantly, and when a young woman appeared at the threshold, her face was a mask of pain and hollow despair. Her name was Varvara. The woman's eyes, vacant and haunted, barely registered Natalia's arrival before she brusquely asked, "Who are you? What do you want?" The air between them thickened with unspoken accusations and raw grief. Varvara's voice cracked as she questioned if Natalia was an agent of some authority, a journalist, or worse, a meddler. Summoning all her compassion, Natalia confessed she had come on behalf of Makar, pleading for a reunion between mother and lost child spirit. The mention of her son ignited a surge of anger and sorrow in Varvara's eyes. "Do not mention my boy," she hissed. But hearing Natalia's quiet insistence to return the beloved rabbit as a balm of peace softened the edge of her fury. A tremulous silence followed, broken only by Varvara's whispered command to leave. Wounded and exhausted, Natalia stepped away, feeling the sharp sting of rejection, yet knowing this was only the beginning. Later that day, burdened by a swirl of emotions and impending responsibilities, Natalia encountered Varvara once more on the dimly lit stairwell. The woman was clutching a worn blue plush rabbit, eerily familiar with its faded checkered ears and sparkling button eyes. Tears streamed down Varvara's cheeks as she confessed her guilt, the unbearable weight of a mother's grief crushing her spirit. "That was always Makar's favorite," she sobbed. "I alone destroyed our family's happiness." Natalia wrapped her arms around the broken woman, offering what comfort she could. Their shared sorrow knitting an unlikely bond amid the shadows. Varvara confessed how, in her dreams, she had once seen her son alive and laughing, but now even those precious visions had faded, leaving only a nightmare that stretched endlessly through her waking hours. Natalia remained silent, overwhelmed by the depth of the pain and the fragility of hope flickering in the dim light. Before parting, Varvara placed the treasured bunny on the windowsill, a fragile symbol of love, loss, and the hope for peace, and asked that Natalia tell Makar his mother's everlasting love. Turning away with hurried steps, she vanished into the dusk, like a sorrowful spectre bound to the past. Night fell once again, wrapping the apartment in a hush broken only by Natalia's restless heartbeat. No cries disturbed the silence this time. Yet she stepped out onto the landing, sensing the presence she had come to accept as both haunting and healing. Sitting quietly, Makar smiled softly, the plush rabbit resting in his small hands. Natalia spoke gently. "Your mother loves you, and always will." A shy, knowing grin lit Makar's face as he replied, "I know." When offered companionship, the boy declined, but entrusted his bunny to her care, saying, "Give it to your son." The revelation struck her deeply. Natalia, though barren and uncertain, found unexpected hope in the child's words. "You do have a son already." And just as swiftly as he appeared, Makar faded into the silence, leaving behind the knitted toy and an inexplicable sense of peace. Heart clenched by the intertwining of grief, hope, and forgiveness, Natalia held the rabbit close, tears streaming freely. The coming days would bring change. For a week later, the news arrived. A child was growing within her, a miracle born from suffering and love intertwined. She dared to hope that this new life would not bear the shadows of those before. The story of Makar and Varvara would remain etched in her heart, a testament to healing, connection, and the enigmatic bonds that tie us beyond the veil. And in that fragile dawn, Natalia's journey toward understanding and awakening continued, guided by whispered cries and the softest echoes of an unseen child. That night, Natalia's restless sleep was shattered again by the piercing wails of a child echoing from the apartment above. For a week now, the incessant cries had haunted her nights, mingling with nightmares and the stark words of a gynecologist who had doubted her chances of becoming pregnant. Alone since Yegor, her husband, was away on a business trip, Natalia's patience finally snapped after an hour of the desperate sobbing. Was the child sick, neglected, or worse? The thought tore at her heart. Clad in her robe, she crossed the hall to the neighboring apartment, but the crying abruptly stopped as she approached the door. Returning to her own flat, she tossed and turned, the silence unsettled by the heavy weight on her chest. Morning brought no relief. Curiosity gnawed at her resolve. As she descended the stairs, she encountered Agafia, the neighbor below, and asked about apartment 84. Agafia's expression darkened with confusion. "Empty for a long time," she said briskly. "But the cries," Natalia insisted. Agafia shrugged and hurried away, leaving Natalia doubting her own senses. The sleepless nights somehow aged her. She grew pale, drawn, and tense like a tightly wound spring ready to snap. One afternoon, lost in thought about the mysterious cries, a knock startled her. Opening the door, she found Elizaveta Yakovlevna, the stern but kind neighbor from downstairs, whose presence felt like a lifeline. "Natalia, I have a story about that apartment," she said cautiously, her voice trembling as if carrying the weight of unspoken sorrows. About a year ago, Elizaveta revealed a young family had lived there, a couple with a bright-eyed boy named Makar, not quite 5. The parents quarreled bitterly behind thin walls, their arguments breaking the fragile peace of the building. One tragic evening, during a heated fight, the front door was left unlocked. The boy wandered out to the landing, slipped on the staircase railing, and tumbled violently down 2 flights, striking his head. The neighborhood was stunned by the sudden tragedy. The devastated parents left soon after. No one heard much about them again. Elizaveta added quietly that the boy's cries had once filled the halls endlessly. After hearing this, Natalia's heart pounded with both dread and pity. Could this be the source of those dreadful cries? The feeling was too poignant to dismiss. That night she waited, bracing herself for what she might hear. Soon a delicate sobbing drifted through the corridor, but this time Natalia followed the sound. On the landing, illuminated dimly by the stairwell lights, sat a little boy no older than 5, tears streaming down his cheeks, clutching a worn blue plush bunny with plaid ears and shimmering eyes. His gaze met hers, intense and vulnerable. Words caught in Natalia's throat. How could she approach a ghost? Trembling, she tried. "Aren't you cold, little one?" She reached out gently. The boy was silent for a long moment, then whispered, "I can't sleep without my bunny. It's lost." Her heart ached, listening to his sorrow. "Shall we look for it together?" she asked softly. The boy nodded sadly, then confessed, "Mom took it with her. We won't find it." Below, the sounds of a drunken crowd drifted upward, and when Natalia glanced back at him, the boy was gone, as if he had vanished into thin air. Driven by fascination and worry, Natalia sought to find Makar's parents. The trail led through Feodosi, a local realtor connected to the apartment's past, who pointed her to a semi-abandoned cottage on the city's fringe. There, dry in a clothesline, hung women's underwear, a small sign of life amid decay. After a long wait, the door opened to reveal a pale woman with hollow eyes and a face marked by pain. "What do you want?" Varvara asked, voice flat and weary. Natalia stumbled through a greeting, debating how to begin. She sensed the woman's torment, imagining the devastating journey of grief that had consumed her. Anger and sorrow flickered in Varvara's gaze. "Are you from social services? A journalist? What do you want here?" she demanded sharply. "How long will this haunt me?" She tried to slam the door, but Natalia blocked it with her foot. Summoning courage, she said, "I am here on behalf of your son. He is still hurting. He cries for his bunny." Varvara's expression twisted in pain and rage. "Don't mention my boy," she hissed. "I won't," Natalia promised, voice steady but soft. "Just return his bunny. He can't sleep without it." Varvara paused, frozen, then whispered, "Go away," and shut the door. Reluctantly, Natalia left the cottage, her heart heavy but determined. Later that day, as exhaustion weighed on her after 3 exhausting job interviews, she was shocked to see Varvara again, on the staircase where Natalia had first met Makar. In her hands was the very bunny, delicate and worn, catching the light in an otherwise somber scene. "This is where it happened," Varvara said, tears spilling freely. "Pasha always took his bunny to sleep. I am to blame for everything." She sobbed openly, and Natalia embraced her, offering silent comfort as the mother's grief softened with the touch of compassion. "Once I dreamt of him alive and happy," Varvara whispered. "Now I do not dream at all. My life is one long nightmare." Natalia said nothing. Words seemed insufficient. Varvara placed the bunny on the windowsill and closed her eyes. "If you see Pasha, tell him his mother loves him and always will." Then she vanished down the stairs, leaving Natalia alone with the plush toy and a flood of emotions. That night, despite the absence of crying, Natalia could not sleep. She ventured onto the landing, heart pounding, wondering if Makar was waiting. There he was, seated on the ledge, caressing the bunny tenderly. "Mom says she loves you, and always will," Natalia whispered, stepping closer. The boy smiled gently. "I know," he said. "Do you want to play with me?" "No," she replied softly. "Adults do not play with toys. You keep it." Makar's eyes twinkled mischievously. "I cannot take it with me. Give it to your son." "I don't have children," Natalia confessed quietly, "and probably never will." "That's not true," Makar said playfully, then vanished into the night, leaving Natalia clutching the bunny, tears streaming down her face. Was it sorrow, empathy, or something deeper that overwhelmed her? She stood on the cold landing, holding the soft toy as memories and hopes mingled. Within the week, a miracle unfolded. Natalia learned she was truly pregnant. Hope sparked in her heart, shining brightly amid the shadows. She vowed quietly that her child would never suffer as Makar had, and that love, not loss, would fill her home. With this fragile light guiding her, Natalia prepared to face whatever might come next. The night had wrapped the city in its dark veil when Natalia found herself once again unable to escape the unsettling sounds that seeped through the thin walls of her new apartment. The child's cries from the unit above were not mere echoes of distress. They were persistent, invasive enough to crush her fragile peace. For Natalia, just beginning to settle into this unknown neighborhood, the nights had become battles against restlessness, each sob piercing deeper, as if to unearth some buried anguish. Only a week had passed since she and Yegor, her husband, arrived here. Unfortunately, Yegor's sudden departure on a business trip left her alone, vulnerable against the creeping shadows of insomnia that preyed on her spirit. The doctor's cold words echoed still, a stark reminder of the fragile hope she carried, the likelihood that motherhood might forever remain a dream. Then came the incessant wailing from above, a spectral lament that bled into her nights, shattering her already fragile composure. Driven by a raw instinct, one sleepless night, Natalia covered herself with a thin robe and ventured toward the source, hoping to understand, perhaps even comfort. Yet, the moment she crossed the threshold of the upstairs apartment, silence swallowed her steps. The cries vanished, as if they existed solely to torment her from afar. Returning to her room, she lay awake, the silence heavy, her mind saturated with questions and unease. Morning brought no relief. Curiosity gnawed relentlessly at her. On the landing, she met Agafia, the elderly neighbor occupying the flat directly below Natalia's. Gathering her courage, Natalia inquired about the mysterious cries disturbing the building's nocturnal calm. Agafia's reaction was a chilling denial. "No one has lived there for a long time," she said, her eyes narrowing in a mixture of suspicion and dismissal. The coldness of her reply clashed with the undeniable reality that Natalia had endured. The child's cries were no hallucination, yet the echoes of mystery only grew denser. Days molded Natalia's semblance into one of fatigue and fragility. Her face paled, her eyes dulled from ceaseless nights filled with phantom sobs and feverish dreams. It was during one of her quiet reflections that a knock disrupted her solitude. Standing at the door was Elizaveta Yakovlevna, the neighbor from below, whose appearance was as sudden as her voice was fragile. "May I come in? I believe we have much to discuss, Natalia." The invitation was unspoken but clear. Inside, amidst the muted light, Elizaveta's story poured forth like a haunting melody of loss and regret. Several months ago, a young couple resided in apartment 84, struggling to maintain the fragile threads of their relationship. Their child, Makar, no more than 5 years old, became an unwilling witness to turbulent spats that echoed through the thin walls. On one tragic day, during a quarrel that spilled beyond private confines, the boy wandered onto the stairwell. Attempting to navigate the steps, he lost balance, tumbling down 2 flights and striking his head with fatal force. The vibrant life of Makar flickered and faded in an instant. The apartment emptied. The family vanished from the neighborhood, leaving behind silence filled with echoes of what had been. Elizaveta's voice softened as she shared how the child's cries had once haunted their nights, relentless and heart-wrenching. When Natalia shared her own experience of the sounds, the neighbor suggested that perhaps the sorrow lingered, caught between worlds. It was a plea, cloaked in superstition and sorrow, for Natalia to help find peace for the child's restless spirit. That night, guided by a mixture of fear and compassion, Natalia found herself on the stairwell once more. There, resting incongruously on the cold steps, was Makar, a small boy with shining blue eyes, wet cheeks, and a weariness that seemed too great for his young face. Frozen by the spectral visitation, Natalia searched for words, finally whispering, "Are you cold, little one? Why do you cry?" Makar's silence was heavy, yet his eyes spoke volumes. His beloved toy, his bunny, was lost, snatched away from his grasp. The faint sounds of drunken revelry drifted upward from below, a stark contrast to the tender encounter on the steps. Turning to share her last words, Natalia found Makar had vanished, leaving only the echoing ache of his absence. Determined to unravel the tangled threads of this haunting, Natalia traced the apartment's past through the local real estate agent Feodosy. His involvement extended beyond mere transactions. He was a custodian of stories, a bridge between the living and the silenced. His guidance led Natalia to a secluded home in the outskirts, a somber relic wrapped in vines and shadows. Clothes fluttered on a line, hinting at life within, but the atmosphere remained weighed by despair. A young woman opened the door, her face etched with pain and hollowed by grief. This was Varvara, Makar's mother, isolated by the weight of loss. The exchange was fraught with tension. Varvara's words cut coldly, her questions sharp, accusing. "Are you from the authorities? A journalist? What do you want here?" Her eyes, pools of anger and sorrow, betrayed the torment she bore daily. Natalia, undeterred but gentle, confessed her purpose: to connect with a child lost beyond the veil, to offer solace where there was none before. Yet her attempts sparked only fury and heartbreak. Varvara's outburst culminated in a demand to leave, frustration cloaked in unbearable pain. Before closing the door on Natalia, a whispered plea slipped through, words soaked in desperation. The encounter left Natalia shaken but profoundly moved. As she hurried away from the shadowed doorstep, the weight of tragedy settled upon her shoulders, mingling with the resolve to be a light in that darkness. Yet the day's trials were not yet done. Later, a chance meeting on the stairwell shifted the narrative anew. Varvara stood there, cradling a worn plush bunny that glimmered faintly amidst the gloom. Her voice trembled as she confessed to Natalia. "This was Pashenka's favorite. I am to blame for everything." Tears spilled, and the rawness of a mother's grief was laid bare. Embraced by Natalia's silent comfort, Varvara revealed the torment of dreams lost and the life fractured by sorrow. With a fragile hope, Varvara entrusted the bunny to Natalia, beseeching her to convey a mother's eternal love to her son, wherever he may be. The gesture, simple yet profound, bridged worlds through a thread of tender devotion. Night fell, and restless yet hopeful, Natalia returned to the landing. To her surprise, Makar emerged once more, seated serenely with his cherished bunny. The exchange was soft and distant, the boy reluctant to linger, yet generous enough to offer the toy's care to her, even as he declared his departure into the unknown. His words, poignant and unsettling, hinted at life yet to come within Natalia herself, something unseen but deeply felt. As the apparition faded into silence, leaving Natalia clutching the bunny close, tears blurred her vision. She stood alone, torn between grief and wonder, the mysteries of loss mingling with faint glimmers of hope. In time, that hope found a voice. A week passed before she learned the news she had longed for. Her own child was on the way. The past, with all its shadows and secrets, had carved a path through the present, touching hearts tethered by unseen threads. Though surrounded by echoes of sorrow, Natalia's journey was only beginning, the fragile promise of new life, a beacon through the darkness that had once seemed endless. And as dawn crept over the horizon, she knew the story carried on, whispered secrets lingering, waiting to be uncovered in the chapters still to come. Natalia stood at the threshold, her heart pounding in her chest as she faced Varvara once again. The air between them crackled with silent storms, the weight of unspoken grief pressing down in the cramped room. Varvara's eyes, dark pools of pain and defiance, refused to meet hers. For days, Natalia had struggled to bridge the widening chasm between them, carrying Makar's message through tangled emotions and broken memories. It had not been an easy task. Elizaveta Yakovlevna, the neighbor whose quiet strength had first opened Natalia's eyes to the tragedy hidden upstairs, had warned her that the family's wounds ran deep. Varvara, guarded and broken, was a fortress of sorrow none had breached, until now. Natalia's own nights were restless, haunted by the boy's pale face and the haunting echoes of his nighttime cries. The visit to the semi-abandoned house, the confrontation at the door where raw anger shattered the silence, remained vivid in her mind like a scar. Today, she had gathered courage to try again, to speak not just as an outsider, but as a messenger from Makar himself. She hoped that perhaps by sharing what the boy had whispered in spectral moments, she might soften Varvara's heart and help lay some ghosts to rest. As she stepped forward, she noticed the tremble in Varvara's hands, clutching the faded blue toy rabbit, a fragment of a happier past slipping through grasping fingers. Varvara, Natalia began softly, voice trembling yet firm. Makar wants you to know he is not alone. He still listens to you. His mother. The room seemed to freeze. Varvara's breath hitched, and the flicker of something raw crossed her face, regret perhaps, or desperate hope. But then the walls closed in again, and her voice cracked with a bitter edge. How dare you speak for him? Who are you to claim my son's words? Natalia swallowed hard, pain flaring in her chest. She answered with quiet resolve. I am only here because of him, because I see his sorrow, and because he longs for peace, just like you. The tension between them felt like a living thing, twisting and pulling at their souls. Yet, beneath the anger, Natalia perceived a fragile thread of connection, a possibility that healing might begin with this difficult conversation. Outside, Agafia's voice murmured through the cracked window, the mysterious neighbor blending ancient wisdom with the strange, restless energy of the old building. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, awaiting a moment of truth to unravel the tangled fate binding its inhabitants. The faint sound of footsteps echoed in the hall, a reminder that others watched. Neighbors like Feodosi, whose role in the apartment's past was shrouded in shadows, and Yegor, Natalia's absent husband, whose distance left her feeling both isolated and fiercely determined. Please, Natalia whispered, taking a tentative step closer. Makar wishes you could forgive yourself. It is not your fault. Varvara's face crumpled, tears welling up but quickly wiped away. The silence that followed was thick with years of pain, sorrow, and regret. Their pasts were not easily mended. The cracks in their lives ran too deep. Yet here, in this fragile moment, Natalia could glimpse the faintest glimmer of reconciliation. It was clear that Varvara's grief kept her imprisoned, a prisoner of a tragedy that neither time nor sorrow could erase. But Natalia understood. that to move forward, to honor Makar's quiet spirit, they would need to confront not just the loss itself, but the shadows of blame and silence that threatened to consume them all. As the afternoon waned, the weight of the house seemed lighter, as if the boy's presence, though ghostly, brought with it an unspoken promise of hope. Before departing, Varvara hesitated, her voice barely audible. If he truly still watches, if he still remembers, then perhaps there is a chance. Tears slipped freely now, breaking the dam that had held back years of anguish. Natalia reached out gently, her hand steady on Varvara's shoulder. There is always a chance. The quiet that settled between them was not defeat, but a fragile new beginning. The stories of the apartment echoed in the walls, carried now in their shared memories and whispered prayers. Natalia left with the solemn promise to return, to keep the boy's story alive, and to help Varvara find the peace that had long eluded her. As she closed the door behind her, the chill of the evening reminded her of the unresolved mysteries still clinging to the house. Behind her, footsteps vanished into shadows, and somewhere, deep in the night, a blue toy rabbit caught the last glint of fading sunlight. The haunting cries had ceased for now, but the journey toward healing was only beginning. Natalia carried the weight of this encounter into the silent night, her thoughts swirling with images of a lost child's innocence and the mother's unbearable loss. She felt the presence of Makar stronger than ever, urging her forward with quiet insistence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, as well as the hope that even the darkest sorrows could one day be soothed. And so, with the echoes of whispered promises and a heart open to the fragile threads of human connection, Natalia stepped into the night. The story of the boy, the mother, and the haunted apartment was far from over. Yet, for the first time, a path toward light began to take shape through the shadowed silence. Soon enough, the next chapter of their intertwined lives would unfold, revealing secrets yet untold, and the enduring strength of love beyond loss. The nights had grown unbearable for Natalia, restless in the quiet of her new apartment, each silence shattered by the desperate cries of a child echoing from the vacant space above. Sleep was a stranger, her mind a tempest of fears and doubts as she wrestled with the ghostly sobs that no one else seemed to acknowledge. The thought of her distant husband Yegor on his business trip offered little comfort. She was utterly alone in this haunting vigil. Her nights bled into fraught, merciless repetitions, and on a night heavy with exhaustion, she could no longer stifle the rising panic that gnawed at her heart. Was the child in danger? Was there some hidden torment that no one noticed? Clutching her robe tight, Natalia mustered the courage to visit the source of the cries, only to be met with sudden silence as she approached. The abrupt cessation of the sobbing filled her with a chilling uncertainty. Returning to her room, she tossed and turned until dawn, the unanswered questions swirling in her mind like a relentless storm. The following morning, determined to unveil the truth, Natalia confronted her downstairs neighbor, Agafia, whose dismissive remark that the 84th apartment had been empty for years only deepened the enigma. Natalia's sanity teetered on the precipice, her pale visage and haunted eyes betraying the toll this unknown grief had exacted. In a moment that seemed tethered between reality and nightmare, a sharp knock at the door startled her. Standing on the threshold was Elizaveta Yakovlevna, the neighbor from below whom Natalia barely knew. With careful hesitation, Elizaveta recounted the heartbreaking tale of that very apartment. A young couple, torn by conflict, with a vibrant little boy named Makar, no older than 5, whose laughter once filled the halls but was silenced by a tragic accident on those same stairs. The story struck Natalia like a lightning bolt. Makar had fallen, his life snatched away by a cruel twist of fate. The grief of the parents rippled through the building, culminating in their swift departure. Elizaveta's voice softened with a mix of sorrow and hope as she suggested that perhaps the child's restless spirit lingered, crying out not for harm, but for peace, a plea for release that Natalia could not ignore. That night, instead of the spectral cries echoing within her walls, Natalia encountered Makar himself. His translucent form perched quietly on the staircase, eyes moist with unshed tears. Unable to bridge the chasm between life and death, Natalia extended cautious words, her voice trembling with warmth and sorrow. Makar's confession that he could not rest without his blue plush bunny, lost to the world his mother had taken, rippled through her heart. She grasped the profound loneliness of this young soul cut short, bound to an earthly tether of love and loss. But before she could speak further, the drunken clamor downstairs stirred the air. By the time Natalia looked back, the boy had vanished like a fading whisper. Driven by an unwavering need to find answers, Natalia traced the past occupants through the help of Feodosi, the astute realtor whose knowledge of the building unearthed a decrepit house on the outskirts where Varvara, Makar's mother, now lived. The encounter was jarring. A woman broken by grief, her eyes hollow, veiling a storm of anguish. The coldness she first displayed dissolved into fierce agony as Natalia gently broached the boy's name. The confrontation spiraled with Varvara's fierce declaration of pain, her desperate plea for solitude, and the accusation that feeling only sharpened the ache she bore. Yet Natalia would not retreat. With resolute compassion, she spoke of Makar's need for his beloved bunny, a small thread of connection between worlds. Varvara's brief falter, an almost imperceptible shiver of recognition, wavered before she ordered Natalia away, locking her torment behind the shuttered door. The sting of rejection lingered as Natalia retreated, her heart heavy but resolute in her silent vow to ease the child's torment. Still, life carried on. Interviews for a new job filled her days, but evening brought her back to the haunting threshold. There, unexpectedly, stood Varvara herself, clutching the blue bunny and tears flowing freely. Her vocal confession of guilt, loss, and the weight of a shattered life spilled out in tremulous waves. Within Natalia's embrace, the fragile barriers of pain softened, allowing two grieving mothers to share a rare moment of healing. Varvara's whispered promise to leave the bunny in Natalia's care was an offering of trust, a tentative bridge between past sorrow and fragile hope. As Varvara vanished into the shadows of her grief, Natalia clasped the plush toy, the softness anchoring her amidst the storm. The night once again held its breath. This time Makar appeared, peacefully seated on the windowsill, a smile touching his lips as he cradled the cherished bunny. Their exchange was tender, a whispered pact forged in the quiet, a promise that in love and memory, pain could find a soft place to rest. His joyful laughter mingled with fading light as he vanished, leaving Natalia alone with the warmth of renewal. The weeks that followed brought astonishing news. Natalia discovered she was pregnant, a new life blooming within her. Her hope kindled the belief that this child, protected by unseen hands, would know a different fate. The mystery of the crying child, once a source of torment, transformed into a profound lesson in forgiveness and healing. Through the bond between two mothers and the innocent spirit of Makar, Natalia found solace and strength to face the future. The blue bunny remained a symbol, a testament to the resilience of love and the power of compassion to mend even the deepest wounds. As dawn broke on a hopeful horizon, Natalia prepared to embrace the new chapter of her life, carrying with her the echoes of loss and the promise of peace, ready to move forward with a heart forever changed. The quiet streets outside stirred with the gentle breath of morning, and in that calm, the past and present converged like a prayer. Natalia's journey was far from over, but she now walked it with renewed purpose, a light illumining the path ahead. The story of Makar, Varvara, and Elizaveta Yakovlevna would forever remain etched in her soul, a living reminder that even in the depths of sorrow, love's enduring plasticity could reshape pain into grace. And with this fragile hope held close, she stepped forward, ready to meet whatever lay beyond the shadows. The night silence had finally fallen when Natalia stepped onto the dimly lit stairwell, the air heavy with the faint scent of damp stone and distant whispers. The usual childish cries that had haunted her ears for so long were gone. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. Her heart pounded unevenly, a mixture of dread and reluctant hope twisting inside her. Memories of restless nights flooded her mind. Those endless hours spent listening to the heartbreaking sobbing from the empty apartment upstairs. One that, according to Elizaveta Yakovlevna, had long been abandoned. Natalia's gaze swept the stairwell, suddenly resting on a small, fragile figure perched silently upon the peeling windowsill. There sat Makar, the boy's ghost she had come to know through whispered stories and fleeting shadows. His pale face glowed faintly in the moonlight, filtering through the cracked panes, and his blue eyes met hers with a gentle seriousness that both comforted and unsettled. This was the encounter she had feared and anticipated. Makar, in his living guise, no longer just a specter of sorrow, but somehow more present, almost real. "Hello, Makar," Natalia whispered, her voice trembling not only because of the cold, but from the weight of emotions tied to this boy who was more spirit than flesh. He smiled softly, a small lift of his lips that carried a promise rather than a sadness. "I've been waiting for you," she added, feeling tears threaten to fall. In his gaze, she found not only the ghostly sadness of a lost soul, but a spark of warmth, a sign that the pain of the past might finally ease. Makar shifted slightly, clutching his worn plush bunny, its once vibrant blue faded by endless years of love and loss. "Mama says she loves me still," he said quietly, voice barely louder than a breath, yet it filled the silence with a tender truth. Natalia's heart ached to hear it, to know that Varvara, his mother, carried such deep love despite the tragic events that had grayed their lives. This confession made his presence tangible, bridging the gulf between the living and the dead, the past and the present. "Do you want to play with me, Makar?" Natalia's invitation broke the stillness, an offer laden with hope and desperation. The boy shook his head, eyes bright but resigned. "No, "I cannot come anymore," he answered with a solemn shrug, "but you can play with my bunny." His words floated in the chilly air, an echo of childhood innocence trapped beyond time's reach. Natalia gently took the toy, feeling the softness beneath her fingers, a fragile link to a boy who had never truly grown up. The conversation hung between them, a bittersweet exchange, shadowed by the knowledge of what had been lost. Makar's playful smile clashed with the grief etched deep in Natalia's mind, reminding her of the heavy burden borne by Varvara. The mother's anguished spirit had revealed a story of heartbreaking mistakes and inescapable guilt, a tale that Natalia could scarcely bear to hold alone. As the chill of the night seeped into her bones, Natalia stood quietly beside the windowsill, her thoughts tangled in the past and future. Makar's figure began to waver, flickering at the edges like a fading candle flame, and with a final, gentle smile, he vanished. But his presence lingered in the softened glow of the plush bunny nestled in her arms, a symbol of a love that transcended even death. Moments later, as the dawn painted the sky with hesitant gold and rose, Natalia felt the first real hope she had known in weeks. The ordeal of sleepless nights, the torment of unanswered cries, and the heavy silence following the tragic accident upstairs, all seemed to breathe a little easier. Even Agafia, the enigmatic neighbor from below, who often murmured of spirits and forgotten histories, might have found a moment's peace in this quiet, unfolding truth. Yet her own future was about to shift in profound ways. The absence of Yegor, her husband, on a prolonged business trip had left her vulnerable to loneliness and despair, but also open to the unexpected grace Makar's brief appearance had bestowed. In the depths of that fragile night, she discovered a renewed belief in the possibility of motherhood, an awakening that gently pulled her away from the shadows. The following days brought fleeting signs and gentle confirmations that her body and soul were realigning, preparing for the miracle she had feared might never come. The persistent fatigue and restless nights gave way to subtle changes, as if Makar's spirit had carried a blessing with him, a quiet invitation to life amid the ruins of sorrow. With every breath she took, Natalia embodied the whispered hopes of generations, blending grief and grace into a fragile tapestry of rebirth. Her meetings with Feodosi, the persistent real estate agent with a keen sense for hidden truths, also took on a new meaning. His reluctance to speak of the previous tenants and the mysterious silence surrounding Varvara's abrupt departure now seemed less like mere silence and more like reverence for a wound too deep to be unearthed without care. When Feodosi finally extended the hesitant offer to help, Natalia felt the fragile bonds of community stretching toward her, bridging the gaps left by loss. Elizaveta Yakovlevna's tales of that fateful year, filled with tension between young Varvara and her husband, the heartbreaking accident resulting in Makar's fall, and the impossibility of forgiveness that followed, echoed hauntingly in Natalia's mind. Yet in that ancient pain, she uncovered the profound humanity of sorrow, that even in tragedy there lies a thread of connection, a chance to heal, if only one dares to reach out. In quiet moments, Natalia found herself walking past Agafia's door, sharing knowing glances, as if through unspoken words they acknowledged the house's restless history and the fragile spirits that lingered within its walls. Agafia's cryptic hints about the mist enveloping their floor, the soft sounds heard by none but those who listened with open hearts, added another layer of mystery to Natalia's unfolding journey. Each day deepened the bond between past and present as Natalia embraced the unspoken promise Makar had left her, one of hope that life, even when shadowed by loss, could bloom anew. The warmth of that night's meeting, the spirited boy's laughter still faintly ringing in her ears, kindled her resolve to face her fears, to nurture the fragile life growing inside her, and to honor the memory of a child's too short life by living fully. As the sun set on that week of dawning revelation, Natalia stood once more at the crossroads of despair and hope, cradling the blue bunny close to her chest. It was no longer just a toy, but a talisman of healing, a beacon guiding her through the darkness toward the promise of motherhood and spiritual renewal. The final whispers of night, intertwined with the promise of dawn, drawing a veil over the past, yet inviting Natalia to step forward into a future that held both pain and blessing. And so, with a heart both heavy and full, she prepared to embrace the next chapter, where mysteries yet waited to be uncovered, and where hope continued to stir in the quiet corners of her soul. Natalia had never imagined that a new home could become a place where the past shadows whispered through the walls at night. Long before her restless nights began, the apartment above hers held secrets wrapped in silence and sorrow. She moved in with cautious excitement, though the thin walls betrayed the quiet she had hoped for. On her very first night, a piercing sound shattered the calm. A child's cry, raw and uninterrupted, wove through the night air like a haunting melody. Sleep eluded her, replaced by the weight of that endless sobbing arresting her mind. For a week, Natalia wrestled with her fear and loneliness. Yegor's business trip left her to face the specter alone. Every night, the plaintive wails gnawed at her resolve. Was the child ill? Abused? The maternal instincts she yearned for were fanned into a desperate hope she could somehow help. When she finally put on her robe and knocked on the neighbor's door, the crying ceased abruptly, as though the sound were tied to her presence, a ghost retreating in shame. That night sleep fled as she tossed through the empty hours, haunted by unanswered questions. Morning brought no relief. Laundry rustled as she encountered Agafia, the neighbor living below on the landing. With a furrowed brow, Natalia asked about the child's cries. Agafia's pale gaze met hers with confusion. "No one's lived in apartment 84 for ages," she murmured. The words unsettled Natalia further, but she trusted her ears. The cries were as real as her loneliness. Her reflection in the hallway mirror revealed her gaunt face and hollow eyes, distress drawing a pallor over her skin. Still, she pressed on, determined to unveil the sorrow woven into these walls. Days later, as she pondered the mystery's depths, a sharp knock startled her from thought. Elizaveta Yakovlevna appeared, composed yet fragile, her presence carrying a quiet gravity. They spoke quietly in Natalia's small apartment. Elizaveta shared a painful chapter of the past year. A young couple and their son Makar had called the apartment home. Their love was bitter, their arguments piercing the thin walls like shards. One tragic evening, Makar, only 5, had wandered onto the stairwell amid a fierce argument. Slipping and tumbling down 2 flights of stairs, he struck his head fatally. The neighborhood was shattered by the loss. The couple left, but the echoes of Makar's cries seemed never to fade. Listening, Natalia felt an ache fold tightly around her chest as Elizaveta's soft voice trembled with memories. The cries that haunted the nights were more than imagined ghosts. They were remnants of pain refusing peace. Elizaveta believed Natalia might offer an embrace to the child's soul, a balm for the unrest that plagued him. That evening, while lying in bed, the expected sobbing moved beyond her walls to the landing. When Natalia looked up, there sat Makar himself. Small, tear-streaked, his blue eyes shimmering with sadness and innocence. Afraid yet compassionate, Natalia approached the boy ghost. She whispered questions, trembling as she made tentative connection. Makar's sorrow was simple and profound. He longed for his lost toy, a blue bunny that earned his peaceful sleep. He told her mother had taken it away, leaving him lonely and haunted. Below, the murmur of a drunken party seeped through the stairwell, momentarily breaking the fragile silence. Yet, when she turned back, Makar had vanished, leaving behind only the weight of her silent promise to aid his very spirit. Tracking down the family was a quest sparked by hope and dread. The trail led Natalia to a neglected house on the outskirts, where faded curtains barely hid a wounded soul. Varvara, Makar's mother, opened the door reluctantly, her gaze empty and her spirit crushed. Her words were clipped and defensive, burdened by grief and anger, mistaken identity fueling her distrust. Yet Natalia persisted, gently revealing her connection and intentions. The mention of her son stirred a tempest of grief and fury within Varvara that made the air heavy with anguish. The encounter ended abruptly, the door closing with a painful finality that echoed Natalia's heartache. Later that day, fate intertwined with sorrow and hope, as Natalia found Varvara on the stairs near the site of Makar's fall. Tears spilled freely as the mother confessed her guilt and pain, clutching the very toy that had once cradled her child's dreams. The sight of the soft blue bunny brought a bittersweet light to the darkness, illuminating shared wounds. Natalia embraced Varvara, offering silent comfort amid the ruin of lost happiness. Between sobs, Varvara whispered words of love and remorse, her heart laid bare in the quiet hallway where tragedy had etched itself into time. That night, Natalia braced for the familiar cries, but was met with a rare, clear silence. Drawn by instinct, she ventured out onto the landing. There, illuminated by the pale light, Makar played gently with his blue bunny. The child's eyes smiled as he spoke softly, sharing his mother's love and acceptance, a balm for his restless soul. Natalia's offer to play was met with a gentle refusal, but a gift, to hold and cherish the bunny as a symbol of healing and remembrance. Makar's playful laughter faded like a breath in the wind, leaving Natalia with a profound sense of connection and a heart unexpectedly full of tears and tenderness. In the following days, a quiet transformation blossomed. Natalia, long shadowed by doubts and sorrow, discovered a stirring of joy deep within her as she learned she was expecting a child. The news brought with it a revitalizing hope, a promise that life could renew even after loss. In her heart, Natalia vowed to hold the memory of Makar close, to love fiercely those she might one day hold in her arms. The apartment's spirit felt lighter. The once oppressive silence softened to a gentle whisper of new beginnings. With each breath, Natalia embraced her unfolding destiny. The intertwining of past and future weaving a tapestry rich with love and redemption. The apartment stood silent, a witness to the profound journey from grief to hope. Shadows no longer haunted the hallways, but were touched by a tender light born from compassion and courage. As Natalia prepared to welcome new life, she carried with her the stories of those lost and the promise of those yet to come. The night's mysteries had unfolded, revealing that even in sorrow, hope could rise and hearts could heal. Her story was far from over, and as dawn approached, Natalia felt the unfolding chapters of her life waiting to be written, paths marked by resilience and the quiet strength born of unyielding love. With the plush blue bunny resting gently in her hands, she stepped toward tomorrow, ready to face whatever awaited with an open heart and steadfast spirit. The echoes of the past would not define her, but rather inspire the light she wished to bring into the world for all the children, seen and unseen. Natalia could not ignore the quiet cries that haunted her nights in the new apartment. Each sob from above was a fragile thread, pulling her deeper into a mystery that stretched far beyond her own restless dreams. As Yegor, her husband, was away on a business trip, the silence of their home amplified the echo of ghostly lamentations that seemed to seep through the thin walls. Despite exhaustion, she felt compelled to understand the sorrow that clung invisibly to the shadows of the 84th apartment. One sleepless night, driven by compassion and desperation, Natalia pulled on her robe and cautiously approached the door above. The moment she stepped closer, the weeping abruptly ceased, as if silenced by her presence. Her heart thudded with a mixture of hope and fear, but sleep remained elusive. The following morning, seeking answers, she encountered Agafia, the neighbor from downstairs, whose eyes mirrored the complex silence of this building. "No one lives there anymore," Agafia whispered with a shiver. "The cries must be from the past." Natalia, though shaken, knew the sound was unmistakable, the plaintive cries of a child. Days bled into restless nights as the unseen weight pulled at Natalia's spirit. She became pale and withdrawn, her face a canvas for her growing turmoil. Then, unexpectedly, a sharp knock at her door interrupted her bleak reverie. It was Elizaveta Yakovlevna, the insightful neighbor below, who carried an air of quiet authority and sorrow. Invited inside, Elizaveta shared the somber tale of Makar, the young boy who had lived in apartment 84 with his parents a year prior. Their terse, turbulent relationship exploded one fateful evening, leaving Makar to wander unsupervised on the stairwell. Tragedy struck swiftly. The child's fall ended his innocent laughter forever, shattering the fragile peace of the neighborhood. Elizaveta's voice trembled as she described the grief that clung stubbornly to the cramped space where Makar once played. Strangely, she believed that Natalia's sensitivity to the ghostly cries was no accident. "Perhaps you can help Makar find peace," she implored softly. Overwhelmed by the weight of the story, Natalia spent another anxious night anticipating the boy's spectral call. But instead of cries, she heard whispers on the landing. There, as if conjured from memory itself, sat Makar. His blue eyes were wet with silent tears, and the gentle contours of his cheeks painted a picture of eternal sorrow. Frozen by fear and tenderness, Natalia sat beside the boy, her voice a hesitant bridge between worlds. "Are you cold, Makar?" she asked cautiously. The boy's gaze lingered on her before he confessed. "I cannot sleep without my bunny. It is lost." Encouraged, Natalia offered to find the cherished toy, But Makar's voice was tinged with despair. Mother took it with her. Suddenly, the noise of revelers echoed downstairs, and when she turned back, Makar had vanished like mist. This fleeting encounter propelled Natalia to search for Makar's family, tracing the past through Feodosi, a realtor linked to the apartment's history. Her quest led her to a dilapidated house on the outskirts of the city, where an apparition of sorrow awaited behind a creaking door. Varvara, Makar's mother, carried the weight of grief in her hollow eyes and tired voice. The encounter ignited a volatile storm of emotions. "What do you want?" she demanded coldly, suspicion and pain sharp in her words. Natalia, trembling yet steadfast, revealed her connection to the apartment and the lost boy. Varvara's anguished denial and bitter accusations echoed the torment of a mother broken by fate. "Do not speak of my child," she cried. But Natalia persisted, pleading for the return of Makar's beloved bunny, the token of his restless spirit. Varvara recoiled, but quietly left the rabbit on Natalia's windowsill with the whispered message of eternal maternal love. The fragile plush toy, bright and incongruous amidst the gloom, symbolized the bond that transcended worlds. That night, Natalia braved the darkened corridor once more and found Makar playing quietly with his bunny on the windowsill. Tenderness softened her voice as she shared Varvara's message. Makar smiled faintly, explaining that he no longer needed to stay. "But you can play with my bunny," he said. Natalia's admission that she had no children moved the boy to laughter and a cryptic promise that a child already awaited her somewhere in the future. With that, he dissolved into the quiet embrace of the night, leaving Natalia clutching the bunny, her heart torn between sorrow and hope. In the following days, Natalia sensed a new rhythm in her life, as the pain of loss mingled with the promise of beginnings. The eternal connection between mother and child, love and loss, past and present, became a beacon guiding her restless soul. When a joyful confirmation revealed her pregnancy, the fragile threads of despair wove seamlessly into the tapestry of hope. Makar's story, etched in the silent cries and whispered memories, remained a haunting reminder of fragile lives and enduring spirits. It was a lesson in compassion, a testament to the unseen bonds that connect us beyond time and space. As dawn edged closer, Natalia understood that the sorrow of the past had shaped the hope of tomorrow. The shadows that once frightened her now seemed to hum with quiet blessings. Holding the rabbit close, she prepared to face the future, with a heart softened by loss and strengthened by love. The stairwell, once a place of spectral veils, felt almost sacred, a threshold between worlds where healing was possible. In that solemn twilight, Natalia let the past rest and embraced the unfolding journey ahead, stepping lightly into tomorrow's uncertain but wondrous promise.